I'll start by saying Eva Hesse is one of the most important sculptors in the post-war period.
I think any description of Hesse has to start with the work. Who she was so much in that work. She's often grouped with the post-minimalists, and yet her work was other things as well. It could also be seen as early process art. It's installation art. She was an extraordinary draftsman. She was a writer. So this was someone who had a big life and lived it in a relatively short amount of time.
She was incredibly important in the 60s in innovating in sculpture, in her use of materials, rope, cord, rubber, steel, anything that was available to her she used in really innovative ways. Using these other materials, ones that in fact feel more common, more banal, one could find them perhaps in the grocery store or the hardware store, brought the conversation about sculpture into a broader arena. And to a certain extent also brought the conversation about sculpture more in relationship to the body, the kind of softness of the materials that she used, the idea of gravity. To me, very much evokes a kind of fragility of both the human psyche but also the human body. So Aeneid means a group of 9, and what you have with the sculpture is a board and then these paper mache hemispheres, and each hemisphere has a string that hangs down. These cords that hang from each one of those hemispheres hang to the floor in a tangle and are affixed to the wall that's perpendicular to where the board is hanging, so that the corner of the gallery becomes part of the work itself. So what begins as a sculpture about geometry, about form, about the grid, becomes something about gravity, about chance, about randomness, about the circumstance of gallery architecture, and bringing that into the conversation for sculpture. Session 4 is part of a series of 5 sculptures that Hesse made between 67 and 68. They are all cubes of varying sizes, a kind of steel cube structure that she then interweaves with rubber tubing. And this is really her using the primary form of minimalism, the cube, and infusing it with this other material, the rubber, which is soft. So if you look into the box, you see the whole interior is lined with this rubber tubing. It's very pliant. It has the opposite kind of effect. It feels very organic. It feels very bodily to the outside structure, which is metal and is this kind of cube grid. I think artists working today in a sculptural medium or within space would look back at Hesse as a predecessor. We see Hesse's influence a lot in women sculptors who are using fiber and cord as their primary material, as we saw in the Fiber Arts exhibition that we had at the ICA in 2014. A number of those artists there were influenced by Hesse in their material choices.
And the work that she did was so unique and also groundbreaking in terms of its use of materials and the way she used these industrial materials, that the legacy of that work is still being felt today.